Hey, Brassfax here. Today we're going to be looking at the Trijicon MRO. I'll be doing my standard review format. I'll give you an overview where I discuss on-the-box features, then observations. What did I notice during the roughly 3,000 rounds or so this optic has been through my group? And finally, my opinion, where I go over things I liked, didn't like, and if you should buy it or you shouldn't buy it. Let's get started. The Trijicon MRO is a simple red dot. That new goes for about $450 with a mount. Realistically, however, due to current sentiment regarding this object, getting one with a mount can usually be done for about $350 on the used market, and most of these are not used. The reported battery life is 50,000 hours, or about 5 years, an industry standard phrase that I'll get to real quick. It's got 6 daylight settings and 2 night vision settings. No cap turrets, simply a flush turret adjustable with 1/2 MOA clicks. The MRO uses a T1 style pattern mount, so plenty of mounting options out there for you. The biggest standout feature, beyond being made by Trijicon and coming in at a upper budget price bracket, is the fact that it's shaped like a toilet bowl. Yeah, no, seriously. Since the ocular lens is smaller than the objective lens, the whole standout feature of the MRO is that the tube effect is no longer present that you generally see in most red dot setups. You also get a marginally increased field of view. We're not in EOTech land here, but if you look through your tube, instead of using both eyes opening and looking past your tube, the increased field of view and the lack of tube effect actually does result in a noticeably open feeling optic. On paper, this optic seems really good, and a serious contender for not only beating the Aimpoint Pro, which it competes with, but even something like a T1. However, through the testing process, some glaring issues came about. Note, I've only actually shot about 1,100 rounds, just a tiny bit more than that, and my friend who I got this from had it for well over 2,000 rounds. It was the exact same optic I bought it from him. The claimed 50,000 hours of battery life is kind of a half-truth or half-lie. It's kind of like those caloric claims on the back of a single bag of chips. Yes, it's technically true, but who the fuck is eating 1/4 of a bag of chips? Or half a bag of Skittles, or 1/3 of a family-sized pizza? Fuck no, I'm getting drunk and eating that bitch in 20 minutes flat. The MRO is kind of like that. Yes, you get 50,000 hours on setting 3, however, on setting 6, 5, or even 4, that number is slashed aggressively. Setting 4, in my opinion, isn't even bright enough for home defense or patrol use, right, for LEO, or anything in that vein. The dot will get washed out utterly on a bright day, and for home defense, your flashlight will wash it out, which is the most likely use case for a red dot sight being left on in a civilian setting. Setting 5, or sometimes even setting 6 on a really bright day is required to overcome ambient lighting, or setting 5, overcome the wash of a very high lumen light in a closed environment, home defense. According to Trijicon, setting 6 will nuke your red dot sight in about 25 days. On setting 5, which is what I used, and occasionally setting 6 when I was out in the desert, mine lasted 3 months and slightly less than 4 months, somewhere in between there. Oh, youch. That is not good. Dabbling into some opinion here real quick, that is really low. The Aimpoint Pro, which is the other competitor in this field, makes it roughly 7 months on its extreme settings. The RMR and Holosun will easily make it past a year on their higher settings as well. Shit, even the Elcan Spectre DR, which is a scope, a prism scope mind you, will make it roughly 3.5 to 4 months on its second brightest setting. Okay, so now for the toilet bowl sized elephant in the room. I understand what Trijicon was going for here. They were trying to create a unique design that offered some benefit. Wider field of view, no walls on your red dot. Cool. Unfortunately, this comes with a myriad of issues I discovered over the testing, and I'll get into that now. First off, since I shoot with both eyes open, I don't even really get the benefit of the toilet bowl effect, and I certainly get the downside. If you've ever picked up an MRO in a gun store and looked around, you know the first issue. The MRO is not a true 1x. It's not like an LPVO, but it's also not like a red dot. It's like 1.01 or something. There is some degree of magnification, and the image is not true. Practically speaking, however, this isn't a huge issue. When you're mounted on the rifle and fixed to your shoulder, the ability to see any kind of distortions is massively mitigated, and I never really noticed anything. However, this issue manifests elsewhere, namely under night vision. You think with a large objective view, the MRO would be a good night vision performer. Unfortunately, it is not. If you go watch this video I'm linking up here from Hop, you'll find a much more in-depth review about this specific issue, about how the MRO does not perform well under night vision, and you can go have fun as he literally tears this thing a new asshole for like 10 minutes. But who am I kidding? Everyone has already watched this video. Don't go watch it. Stay here. We got dog here. Hi. Regardless, I did try to get passive aiming footage of the MRO, but the 2 times I went out, it was really dark, and it just looked like shit. So I'm not going to show that here because I just gave up like 20 seconds in. Not only does the MRO have issues collecting enough light so that you can actually see through the optic under night vision, but it's also blurry. Because you're not looking at a real image, the image on the other side of the MRO is not in focus. This is like a compounding effect. An image that isn't in focus isn't a terrible deal, right? It works for the Elcan Spectre on 1X, for example. However, when you combine it with terrible light gathering abilities, you end up not being able to see anything. So even though the MRO has night vision settings and it's advertised as a night vision capable optic, in reality you're probably not going to be using this thing as a passive night vision aiming device. It's going to be a last resort kind of thing. You can do some occluded shooting with night vision, which kind of sort of works at close range, but A, you need dual tubes for that, and B, it's not exactly accurate past 10 yards because occluded shooting actually has an offset. Real quick, occluded shooting is where you shoot with both eyes and you overlay the image, right? Kind of like bin aiming concept from Trijicon. Finally, still on the toilet bowl effect. The MRO, because of this mismatched sheet of glass, has a noticeably higher parallax than a traditional red dot. Now it's worth noting, most red dots have a degree of parallax. Parallax-free is a marketing term that isn't true in the slightest. A lot of red dots have upwards of 5, 6, 7, 8 inches at 100 yards of parallax if you pin the dot. That is not insignificant. My testing corroborated that. At 25 yards, which is not only the range of my shooting range, but also a typical range in which you would use very unconventional shooting positions, I noticed 1 inch of drift when pinning the red dot with a RMR, Trijicon, right? Keep it in the family. And funnily enough, 2 inches of drift with the Cyclops Primary Arms G2, which is a prism, so it's a scope. It's worth noting you can't actually pin the Cyclops G2 to the left and the right. You'll exit the eye box, so it can only go about halfway, but 2 inches there. And pinning the MRO, I got 3 inches of drift with the MRO, upwards of 3 times more than the red dot from the same company. If you extrapolate this out to 100 yards, you're looking upwards of 4 inches of parallax for the RMR, 8 inches of parallax for the Cyclops G2. Once again, not a apples to apples comparison. I just happen to have it on hand. And 8 to 12 inches on the MRO of parallax. Unconventional shooting positions really only make sense at 50 yards and in. And even then, I've never had to pin the dot to the wall of the optic. Trying it again with the dot at the halfway mark, which is far more realistic, I was seeing about 1.5 inches at 25 yards, which is far more realistic and manageable. Also, pinning to the wall was so difficult for me, I actually couldn't do it without introducing some rifle cant, so you could probably shave off about half an inch of parallax on these things because it's induced due to rifle cant. So, certainly not a deal breaker, but it's kind of annoying since most other red dots don't have this degree of parallax. Moving on with some other issues I had with the MRO. The MRO has way too few adjustment settings. Yep, that's right, we're approaching previously unheard of levels of pettiness. But this actually ended up being kind of an obnoxious thing on something so simple as a red dot. Now, this might be limited to me. I have decent levels of stigmatism, so adjusting the red dot to my preferred setting, not too bright, not too dim, drastically reduces how far my stigmatism kind of flares out. Okay, never mind, like half of you are crippled, so this applies to a lot of people. But yeah, the MRO has low adjustment settings. Realistically, outdoors, you have setting 6, setting 5, and maybe setting 4. If the sun is out, you can kiss setting 4 goodbye. That means you really only have 2 to 3 settings. Most of the time, you will find yourself with a dot that is either too bright or too dim. In practice, this kind of ends up in a situation which you'll run the dot on the brighter setting, right? Because you want to have the dot pop to your eye and act like a red dot. And then when you come up on target, you'll find yourself with a dot that is apparently too big, and you'll actually turn it down one setting and get the dimmer dot so you can have more precision, right? If you're taking a precise shot. So it's just a weird trait of the MRO, so to speak. Sometimes the lighting conditions lined up perfectly and the MRO doesn't have this issue, but sometimes it doesn't and you're dealing with imperfect dot brightness. Is this a huge deal? No. It's just something that slowly pecks away at you and annoys you more and more and more. Alright, for many, this might felt like I was shitting on the MRO for 10 minutes straight. So you'll be shocked if I tell you I actually don't think this thing is a giant hunk of shit. It's worth noting it's a red dot. There's hard to come up with positives beyond the thing works. And the MRO works. And yes, it has a laundry list of downsides, but you can live with a lot of these depending on your desired use case. That being said, there are a lot of red dots on the market that don't have these issues, a lot of them a lot cheaper. So, is this optic for you? It really depends. There is a market of people, including myself, that put value on the, let's call it military contractor products. L3, Trijicon, Aimpoint, the increased reliability, quality control, non-third world sweatshop assembly conditions, right? Actually well-paid human beings that don't need suicide nets to keep them from running away. People that actually respect the product they're making and give a shit. There is value in this. And for many, this is a minimum requirement. Regardless of how much I actually like Holosun, and I think they're one of the best red dot manufacturers right now, if not the best, you can't ignore how many of them are coming completely fucked from the factory. You open the box and it doesn't work, or dying within 500 rounds. Don't get me wrong, Holosun engineering is really good. And if you survive, or if the optic survives this initial gambit, Holosun products tend to last just as long as their Western counterpart. But they have a QC issue. There is a large, non-trivial demographic of people that want a functioning, high-quality red dot product out of the box. Maybe it's because they don't shoot that much. They buy it, zero it, and then they shove it in their patrol car, or in the closet for home defense, or they give it to a girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever. In this case, I believe that optic fits that niche. Not everyone needs a red dot that has night vision compatibility, can be shot under a VTAC barricade, right? Not everyone is doing this kind of shooting, and they have a smaller niche for using their red dot. So, if you want a high quality red dot and are not in the mood to spend $600 or whatever dollars for a T1, T2 or whatever, because maybe this is your fourth rifle or something, or you simply just want a high grade optic that has some downsides that don't really apply to you, then maybe this is the optic for you. However, people that can actually vet their gear and expect a certain level of performance out of their gear, the MRO begins to lose a lot of appeal. In isolation, none of these issues really are game changers, especially when you consider most people still don't even have night vision, and of those that do, passive aiming is generally more of a backup plan than a primary aiming method. It's a tool in the toolbox, right? That being said, this optic isn't really for me, and it kind of reminds me of sort of like those long-term mediocre relationships that you hang out in because it's comfortable, where you can get used to the issues, and then finally when you break up and go see other people, when you finally buy a different red dot after using the MRO, it's like the clouds have cleared and you're like, wow, holy shit, I don't have to live with all this bullshit. I can actually get a red dot with a 1 year plus battery life. I can actually fine tune my brightness setting and actually zero it with a good setting and then actually turn it up, use it at night, whatever. I can passively aim. I don't have dog shit parallax. What? This whole package only cost me $200? Stuff that goes on my rifle is competing with other stuff on the market. A big reason why I'd want to use a red dot is to get the advantages that it has over the LPVO. And in this case with the MRO, there are not that many more advantages that an MRO offers over an LPVO. There's no passive night vision. The battery life kind of sucks. The illumination is not as good as other red dots or even LPVOs. Yeah. So depending on the person, either that first option or my second description fits you, and that will determine if this optic makes sense for you. Alright, That's been some brassy facts for you. Hope this helped you decide, or better informed you when it came to deciding if you want to buy the MRO or not. If you wouldn't mind, comment down below. Let me know if the downsides of the MRO are deal breakers for you, or it's something you can work with. That's something I'm really curious about. Regardless, we'll see you guys around. Have fun.